Vice President Mike Pence and Democratic challenger Senator Kamala Harris are preparing for their debate tonight with an increased level of COVID-19 safety precautions put in place. Both sides have agreed to a plexiglass barrier after Mr. Pence's team originally opposed the move. They will also stand about 12 feet apart. Both candidates have recently tested negative for COVID-19. The pandemic, of course, is sure to be a major topic tonight as the vice president heads up the White House's coronavirus task force. And Senator Harris has been a frequent critic of the Trump administration's response. So for more on the debate, let us bring in Professor Larry Sabato. He's the director of the Center for Politics at the University of Virginia and a professor of politics. And we love talking to him, Larry. What does this debate over the plexiglass and the safety protocols before the actual debate tell us about both campaigns' approaches to the coronavirus? And I will note again that it is the people within Trump world that are becoming infected with coronavirus, and the vice president is the head of the task force on coronavirus. So clearly people within the administration haven't been practicing the guidelines that they've been they say the American people should implement in their own lives.
That's for sure, Vlad. They have not been practicing the appropriate guidelines, and that's now obvious to everyone. You know, if Donald Trump himself could take something back that he has said, he'd never admit that he'd take anything back. But the one thing he'd probably take back is attacking Joe Biden at the first presidential debate for wearing masks. And then he tests positive for COVID, and how many is it now? 20 people associated with the White House and some of the press who are in there. I've talked to some of the press people, and they're tense about it, and they ought to be. It's a disgrace, really. So this is a good issue for the Democrats. It's not just a tiny little thing. It reminds people that the central issue in the campaign, at least from a Democratic perspective, is the coronavirus and the poor response, which has led to the deaths of, I think it's up to 212,000, something like that, in America.
Yeah, so let's talk about the role typically of vice presidential debates. What role did they play in the past, and how do you expect this one to be different?
Well, there have been 11 of them. They started in 1976. We got off on the wrong foot 4 years later. In 1980, they didn't have one. There were lots of debates about debates, and they never got around to it. All of the other cycles have had one. They've had some impact. In some cases, absolutely minimal. In other cases, measurable but minor. Here's where they matter. They matter when the two vice presidential candidates use their time not to define themselves or make themselves look good, but make their running mate look good. They can affect the image of their running mate. Now, in the case of these two, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, they've been around for so long, I don't know that it's possible for the VPs to really affect their image. It's pretty much in concrete.
So, all right, what do we know about Vice President Pence and Senator Harris's political backgrounds that might inform what we see tonight? I know that the sort of take on Vice President Pence is that he's sort of milquetoast and that he's a calming presence and that he's a nice guy, but he's actually a pretty tough debater. We saw him debating Tim Kaine 4 years ago. He was no pushover. And of course, we know, having watched Senator Harris on some of her senatorial committees, that she's a tough questioner. She's a tough debater, too.
Yeah, if I had one prediction that I could count on, if I could get anybody to bet me, it would be that this vice presidential debate would be much more memorable, high-toned, and less revolting than the first presidential debate. I think that's the safest bet you could possibly have. Both Harris and Pence are decent debaters to very good debaters, depending on the circumstance. It might actually get to some substance and policy, and this is the real shocker. I think both of them are going to be able to complete sentences.
You know, not for nothing, Larry, I don't think the bar is particularly high to beat out the performances that we saw during the presidential debate. So my question was going to be about the lessons that the vice president and Senator Kamala Harris should take away from the first presidential debate, but I presume it's just don't do that.
It's a case study in what not to do. And let's not play, equal on the one hand, on the other hand. It was President Trump who blew up that debate. It was President Trump whose behavior was outrageous. Did Joe Biden say some things that he shouldn't have said, like calling the incumbent president a clown and so on? He shouldn't have said it. And I think he's admitted it, at least on a few interview shows. But President Trump came into that debate either very angry, which he often is, or determined to blow it up. And he did indeed blow it up to the point where most of the communications I get on Twitter and email and so on are, quote, cancel the 2 remaining presidential debates.
Larry, before I let you go, I'm thinking about the lines of attack from both camps, and as we say, the coronavirus is sure to be front and center. If you're advising the vice president and Senator Harris essentially says, look, I don't have to attack you. I can just point to the 210,000 people in this country who've died from the coronavirus due to the response, or she can say the lack of response, from your task force and from the mixed messaging of the president of the United States. How does the vice president defend against something like that?
Well, he can do 2 things. Probably he'll do both, which is, one, come up with some stats that may be real or, in the Trump tradition, may be phony to defend the decisions they've made since January. More likely, he will try and change the subject as often as he can, because coronavirus, COVID, that is a loser, capital L loser, for Republicans.
Yep. Larry Sabato, always great talking to you, always very insightful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.